Welcome to Film Witch, a podcast with me, Sandy Settle, practicing pagan witch and tarot reader for over a decade, and a big fan of films. Here I talk about movies, their intersections with witchcraft and femininity, and whatever else I have on my mind, which is usually a lot. Blessed be, come in and sit for a spell. And please, rate and review me on Apple, follow me on YouTube and Spotify, and share it with someone you think might enjoy it. It helps way more than you might realize, and it means everything to me. Please consider joining my Patreon, which is the best thing you can do to help this podcast continue. You can also find me on Instagram and on Letterboxd at FilmWitchPod. You can send kind words, suggestions, and business inquiries to filmwitchpod@gmail.com. So before I kick off this episode, I needed to put in a little edit here at the beginning. I recorded this episode on Sinners with one of my closest friends, Carolyn, prior to hearing about this. I recently watched a really, really well-made video essay on this subject by a creator on YouTube. His channel is called In Praise of Shadows. I couldn't find his real name, but his channel is pretty popular. I've been watching it for several years now. Usually he does videos about horror media of all kinds. He does a really great video on Junji Ito. He took a hiatus for a long time and recently came back. I'm not sure why he left. It might have been harassment stuff, but yeah, he's back now. And his first video back is this one. And the video is called The Return of Jonathan Majors. I'm going to link it in the YouTube post that I make for this episode in the comments. And I encourage everybody to watch this as he obviously put a lot of work into it. It's over half an hour. It's almost an hour long, excuse me. And he goes over the entire history of Jonathan Majors and the controversy surrounding him and the allegations against him. If you are an assault survivor, I recommend treading with caution when it comes to watching this. It could be potentially very triggering. Yeah, I felt it behooved me, and I felt an obligation to mention this before we get into this episode about Sinners, because it was information I just simply didn't have initially about Michael B. Jordan, one of the the perhaps major character in this film. I still think the film has a major merit for so many reasons. I'm not, besmirching its legacy in the beginning or anything like that. But I do think that it needs to be discussed. Since Michael B. Jordan is such a major part of this film, the video by In Praise of Shadows goes into this with more detail, but the basic gist of it is that Jonathan Majors is a perpetual abuser who is trying to make a comeback in Hollywood right now. And Michael B. Jordan released a statement of support for this abuser very recently. And I just want to say off the bat, before we, sing his praises in this role as Smoke and Stack and all of that defending abusers in this way, abusers who have a long documented history of abuse, specifically, and I'm not to say that, one allegation is not valid, but rather that a group of allegations, right, such as your Harvey Weinsteins, in this case, Jonathan Majors, that it seems every previous relationship or every woman, who is asked about their intimate relationship with this person comes back and says, yeah, that person is abusive. I think that that's a moment for true introspection as far as like, if you're friends with this person who these allegations are being, posed against, if you're family of this person, if you worked with this person, it's not just abuse towards women as far as the allegations go. It's also abusive behavior on sets. So I just think that it really needs to be brought up. it was something that I had not heard about at all leading up till very, very recently. So I feel it is not being discussed enough. Clearly, it's not out there enough, right? That someone who is so universally praised, such as Michael B. Jordan, I believe Matthew McConaughey also released a statement in support of this abuser. I think that it's not just the perpetrator of the abuse themselves who needs to be condemned, but the people who enable abuse who need to be condemned in these situations. And when you come out in defense of someone who has multiple women positing allegations against them about abuse, right? I think that is a moment to pause, especially as a masculine person. I think that is not a moment to start voicing your support for an alleged abuser. I think that is a moment to pause and reflect and perhaps have a personal conversation with this friend of yours who has multiple allegations of abuse posited against them. It is not a moment to make a public statement of support in support of an alleged abuser. It is just not the time. So I think that in order, to air out how I feel and how I viewed this coming to light for me in context of the discussion, the very positive discussion that my friend and I have about this film, about this actor. I think off the bat, I just need to begin the episode with this statement from me that I in no way support I in no way support this actor coming out in a statement of support against a repeat alleged abuser. And that just was something that I need to say. And I hope you guys enjoy the episode. Thanks very much.
From 2025, twins Smoke and Stack return to their home in the Mississippi Delta after a mysterious stint in Chicago, with equally mysterious money burning a hole in their pocket. They elicit the help of their cousin Sammy, a blues player, Smoke's former flame Annie, a hoodoo practitioner, and other locals to open a juke joint on the outskirts of town. They get far more than they bargained for when a white stranger named Remick turns up at the door that night, asking for entry. Ryan Coogler's new Southern Gothic classic re-examines and reinterprets the trappings of the vampire genre with popcorn panache. Hey everybody, welcome back. I am very excited for this episode to have one of my dearest friends, Carolyn King, here with me. You're Carolyn Posey now, am I right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm very happy to have you, and thank you for being here with me.
Not a problem. I'm so excited to be here and, in particular to talk about this movie because I have a lot of things to say.
You and, everyone else. I've watched, at least, 15 different video essays to prepare for this episode. So, and that's, this movie came out very recently and everybody has already, posted all of their thoughts on it. So you are not alone in, definitely wanting to talk about this film after you saw it. It's funny because I had already asked you to guest on the pod, and we were trying to come up with what to, talk about in the episode. And we had a couple films that we were discussing, but then you saw this in the theater and immediately blew my phone up about it.
The second I walked out of the theater, I started texting you.
And I knew it was probably going to have to be this. So thank you for waiting till I had a chance to see it, because I had to wait till it was up on VOD. But I am excited to talk about it. This is definitely the newest film that I've talked about thus far on the podcast. So very exciting. So the first thing I really wanted to do is ask you what you felt drew you, to this particular film. Because I always, if I have a guest, I let them kind of choose the film. So I just wanted to ask you, what made you want to do this film? And you can share any thoughts that you have about that.
I think, and we're going to get into this. There's a couple things. I think I cannot ignore the fact that I have an undying love for Michael B. Jordan and everything he does. So that was like, let me get on the internet and talk about how great Michael B. Jordan is. That was number one.
You're like, I'm a
But
simple girl.
number two is that it's just a great story. And I'm not particularly a kind of person who watches a lot of horror or a lot of like vampire stuff, as you know.
Yeah, we originally weren't going to do a horror film for this episode.
Yeah. They're not typically my thing. And I wasn't even planning on watching this movie, but my husband convinced me to go see it. Well, I guess told me basically, I'm going to see this, and if you want to see it, you gotta come with me.
Yeah.
I was like, well, Michael B. Jordan's in it, so I'll go for anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I think after I watched it, just like my immediate reaction to it was like, I have to talk to Sandy about this because she's going to be a great person to talk about because I know she's going to love this movie and also have a lot of feelings about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I think that there is an element of it that I really connected with in like a cultural studies kind of way. And like, as you know, I have a background in cultural anthropology.
Absolutely.
And I'm a student of culture, I would say.
Absolutely.
And I'll get to it as we talk through this movie, but there were several moments in this movie where I was just kind of like in awe of like what a beautiful expose it was of American culture, both in like 1930s, but also today.
Yeah, very prescient a film I felt
Mhm.
for these times. I don't even think that Coogler really like I don't think he expected it to be as prescient as it feels watching it in 2025. I mean, he like
Mm.
unless he had a psychic tell him the future, which, let's not rule it out, but I don't think he himself maybe knew exactly, how on the nose it would feel watching right now.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the research that I did, as far as I wanted to know what how Coogler kind of the inception of this idea for him, right? Like where was the beginning of the idea that he had to make this film? One of the things that I found was that he's actually a big horror film fan, and but hasn't obviously had a chance to make a horror film thus far in his career. He made Creed, the Rocky sequel movie with Michael B. Jordan, and he made the two Black Panther films. But he didn't. I watched one interview where he was kind of like, I was feeling like nobody really knew me as a filmmaker yet because I have such a love for this genre, and I finally had a chance to make something of my own, and I definitely immediately gravitated towards horror, which I thought was really cool. But the other thing was that the kernel of the idea for the film really started with his Uncle James. And his Uncle James lived pretty close to where his parents bought a house in Richmond. He was like born in Oakland, and I think that Richmond is quite close to Oakland, but his parents didn't originally own a house. Then they were able to buy a house, but it wasn't in Oakland. It was in this town called Richmond that was kind of close by. And his uncle was the only person the only relative who lived nearby that house. It was like a 10-minute walk or something, he said. And so he would like go over to his uncle's house when he was growing up because he didn't like have anywhere else to go really in that area. And his uncle James was a World War II veteran, and he, I believe, was a steel worker, he said. But he used to live in Mississippi. And he, I have a really good quote here from him from the interview that I watched. He said that when his Uncle James would get home, he would like put on a blues record and start drinking whiskey. And he said, if the whiskey was cold enough and the song was good enough, I might get a story about Mississippi. And he said that these stories that his uncle would tell him were always like kind of wild, like his uncle was like always getting into trouble, and like he had to leave Mississippi because he got into some kind of dispute with his white boss, and like he was in danger, like just like really exciting stories, but like scary too and stuff like that. So it seemed like it was this marriage of an idea of like his love for blues that his uncle instilled in him, and also this like kind of like horror element in that, like the lived experience of Black people is like
Mhm.
fraught with so much horror. And like,
Yeah.
but also that blues is kind of about that horror and like turning it into something transcendent. So this was kind of like the beginning of this idea for him, and I thought that was really beautiful. His uncle died of cancer while he was working on Creed, and he didn't like he wasn't there, in his uncle's final days because he was working on this film, and he was talking about feeling this kind of like guilt over that, and this kind of it felt like in a way is maybe his like homage to his uncle. It was
That's wow,
really
I didn't know
nice because
that.
I wouldn't have thought like that it really had anything to do with his family or anything if I hadn't watched those interviews about it.
Yeah.
But that was the beginning of the idea that eventually turned into the film.
Now I want to hear some of these uncle stories.
I know. He like only shared that little tidbit, he was like he had to like leave Mississippi because he was in like literally in physical danger. But he said, oh, the last part of that was there's a quote from Kugler that the stories were, quote, crazy. I thought my uncle was a G. So it's like, he was like my uncle's, like just like this kind of extraordinary figure from these stories that he would tell him. So another influence that Kugler mentioned that I thought was really great because it's certainly in my wheelhouse and, something that I related to a lot was that he mentioned Stephen King's book, Salem's Lot, being a big influence on the film. And it's funny because he said that he hadn't seen any of the film adaptations of Salem's Lot. I don't know if you've seen any. I know you're not as much of a horror fan,
No.
but the basic premise of Salem's Lot for anybody who's not, I think most people listening to my podcast probably are aware, but if you're not, it's Stephen King's kind of adaptation of Dracula. And the inception of the idea for it was like, what if Dracula, originally he was like, what if Dracula came to New York City? And then his wife Tabitha was like, that's dumb. He would get hit by a taxi. And so he was like, okay, what if Dracula came to like a small American town? And that's the whole premise of Salem's Lot. It's like a kind of a
Hmm.
loose adaptation of Dracula. But Kugler mentions this being his favorite King novel. And he also mentions a book that I really love by Stephen King, which is actually his nonfiction book called On Writing, that's just about the writing process. And I thought that was awesome because since Coogler wrote this film, and directed it, I think I was really happy as a writer that he kind of like immediately started to get into like his like writing influences on the film. I was just
Yeah.
really happy. I was really happy about that personally. So yeah, I thought that was great too. Like, I'm a big Stephen King fan myself, so I was excited when he specifically brought up Salem's Lot as a big influence on this particular project for him.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And I agree with you. I think it's cool that he's like connecting the writing element in with, this entire venture of this film.
Hmm. I was loving, some of the interviews that I watched with him were just so great. I feel like the internet has kind of created this atmosphere where like we just get so much information about films now because there's like so many interviews that different critics do and different distributors do, and then they all get put on YouTube. So like we get to like we just like get to
Yeah.
see everything now, and we get to like explore like every aspect of a film. Like maybe like I really love it. Maybe just because I'm like a little like bird who likes to like get all these scraps of information together. But I maybe like some people are like they're like, oh, I wish there wasn't like so much information about everything now. But personally, I love it, and it definitely is exciting for me to like, especially with a film that's really good like this one. Um, I think it's fun to hear about like all the inspirations for everything and like how they came up with certain ideas for things, and especially I was gonna say that as a horror fan, like I felt like you probably don't really have an opinion on this, but last year was not like a really great year for horror.
Mm.
Um, I really loved Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, but nobody's surprised by that because I'm a huge Robert Eggers fan. But other than that, it was kind of like not a great horror year, and so it's cool this year just to see, something kind of like early on in the year that's like so well received and so well made. That was exciting for me. It kind of like it bodes well for the future of film, I think. I don't know. How did you feel about that? Like being
Mm.
less of a horror fan perhaps, but also feeling like this film really spoke to you, and what it means for film going forward, because I think that that's an important part of the conversation that a lot of people have been bringing up.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that when I think about the trajectory of film and like where it's going, and what I enjoyed about this movie is like, if nothing else, like it's an original story. I'm personally so tired of sequels and prequels and remakes. Of everything. So to get like an original story, but still have like the familiarity of like vampire lore and like all of that stuff, but like in an original package in 2025 feels so unique. That I just really appreciated that element of it for sure.
Yeah, I feel like Coogler. I've seen Creed and Black Panther. I haven't seen the second Black Panther film, but I feel like he is a very like populist filmmaker in a lot of ways. Like I know
Mm,
Christopher Nolan was one of his mentors for a while, who is also a very popular filmmaker in my opinion. So I think that Coogler is good at making high concept things accessible to the average audience, which I think is actually quite difficult a lot of the time. I think,
mm,
um, you know, um, I think that he's definitely like an aesthete in a lot of ways, which I can totally respect and relate to. By which I mean, I think that Coogler is very interested in the image to convey feeling, rather than elaborating a lot on the page.
mm,
Like I think for me, watching Sinners, I was very much so struck by the images more so than I was by the writing a lot of the time. So I think he's like got a real visual storytelling style, and I think that is a little bit more populist, just like technically speaking, right?
mm,
That it's kind of like it's not like good or bad, it's a preference almost like, but I think a lot more like a larger group of people kind of like gravitate towards like that kind of like majesty of the image in film, especially these days. So I think that he's able to like, because like in many ways Sinners has a lot of high concepts in it, but they're kind of hidden. I don't know if you felt this way about it. Please share,
yeah.
if that's the impression you got. But I definitely did. Like I felt like a lot of the subtext is like not really an obvious, like subtext inherently usually isn't obvious, but like definitely not in this film. Like I think, a lot of it for a white audience, a lot of what Kugler is getting at, I think is going to go over there. Is going to go over the average white person's head. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's like one particular element of the story, like that I really had to like kind of think about and like noodle over for a while because I walked away from it being like, this was one of the first vampire stories that I've watched in like a horror vampire realm where I'm like, maybe the vampire wasn't that bad. Like wasn't the
Yeah.
ultimate evil person. But then like you also have to take it into context of like, so Remick is trying to, you know, convert them all into vampires and, build this new quote unquote like new world with them outside of the bounds of like racism and stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
there's also an element of like him whitewashing the like their black experience,
Mm-hmm.
and like making them choose between like either stay here and potentially get murdered by the KKK or come with me and we can create this new vampire utopia.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no room for them to just exist as who they are and who they are now and like to just have this juke joint and like live their lives and be free. as much as they can be. So, while there's a part of me that's like, oh yeah, like why wouldn't you take up that deal? There's like so much more context to it than you like have to think about, especially as a white person like coming in and watching this movie that is so clearly about the Black perspective in America. I think it's important for people who are not coming from that experience to take the movie and then also like think about it for a little bit. Don't just walk away with your first impressions and then never think about it again.
I found a really good quote from Kugler about the character of Remick specifically. And that's what you were saying is a great segue, I think, into like what he's talking about here. But he says, it was very important that our master vampire was unique and as specific as the situation was. It was important to me that he was old, but also that he came from a time that pre-existed these racial definitions, so he'd be extremely odd, that it would all seem odd to him, but also that he would understand what it was and offer up a sweet deal.
Mm,
I I was while you
wow.
were speaking, I was also thinking about like kind of the culture vulture, as the kids say, aspect of
Yeah.
Rimmick, and how it's implied that he somehow takes ownership over the vampires that he creates, that he can co-opt their skill and also their perhaps even their memories. He wants Sammy because Sammy can kind of has this otherworldly power of music, this almost like conjuring power, and that he like wants that in some way, and that somehow he could co-opt that in some way by making Sammy into a vampire. Like this is mostly implied rather than like
Hmm.
made literal. Like it's not spelled out like on it's not like we're never really get given the view of what it would be like for Sammy after he became a vampire, like what exactly Remick would be able to take from him, like stuff like that. It's more like its implication. But it's like I think that that's also interesting when it comes to the Remick character as like a villain. And then there's another thing. Let me find it in my notes real quick. There's a really great interview that I found on YouTube with a film critic. Her name is Hannah Flint. And this whole interview was my favorite that I found between her and Kugler. She posted it like on her personal YouTube without any editing. Like so it didn't take out all the stuff that they're talking about that you would normally not get to see, I think, in an edited interview, because it's like it gets a little I not thorny, but like they get into some really heady stuff that you just never get to see in something more commercial.
Mm.
But one of the things that she asks about, so this is the most fascinating part of it. I will probably post a link to this interview that I'm talking about. Her name is, once again, Hannah Flint is her name. And I will probably post a couple links in different places so people can watch this whole interview between her and Kugler for themselves. Because, like I said, it was my favorite thing that I found. It was just like so much more interesting than most of these like talking head interviews that they have to do for press junkets. But she asked Kugler if this is the first Marxist vampire movie, and she notes. To prop up this idea that the vampire Remick is presented as like kind of impoverished compared to the typical stereotype of a vampire. Like she mentions kind of like the vampires in the Lost Boys as being maybe one of the only other examples in pop culture of vampires who are like kind of not like wealthy. But she's like,
Yeah.
most of the time the vampire trope is like they're like upper class. Like the implication, the subtext is that they're upper class in some way, that they're wealthy. So she was like, it's really notable to me that he is like an impoverished vampire, and that this is propping up her kind of idea of like being like a Marxist themes in his vampire movie. In this interview, Ryan Coogler becomes like noticeably flustered by this question from her, and then his wife is sitting apparently like right off camera, like behind her maybe, or like off to the side, and he like kind of he like says his wife's name, and he's like help me to her. And it's like he's like I realized after watching it a couple times because I was like, confused at first why he was like acting so kind of flustered. And I realized it's because like he wants to talk about this with her, but like he's really concerned about doing it. Oh,
Mhm.
like saying that that's, saying like outright that that's what his film is interrogating, right? That his film is like about capitalism, about socialism, about Marxism, philosophically speaking, and the hierarchy and the fabric of American society and why it is the way it is and why we're in such a fucked up situation now and like all of this. He says to her, to the film critic Hannah Flint, he says, "I'm loving talking to you, but I don't know how comfortable I feel." And then he kind of trails off. Da, 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 da. So basically, his answer is
Mm.
yes, right? His answer is yes, yes, it is Marxist. Yes, it is about, capitalism versus socialism and like all these things and like how these systems pit us against each other and create racial boundaries between us. And and then he goes, "You're really astute," to her, the critic. And then he
Wow.
says, he's kind of going on and basically he's like, "I said it with the movie," and kind of just like doesn't, he just doesn't pick it up again. But like, I thought this was fascinating.
That's yeah, I was just gonna say that's fascinating. I hadn't even really yeah, I hadn't made that connection or thought about it in that way, but it
But
yeah, it
you
makes a
did
lot of
though, babe,
sense.
because you because of what you were just saying to me
Yeah.
about Remick, and like that's what I was saying
Mhm.
about like kind of like the average white film goer has maybe not had these conversations with themselves, like yes, there are some progressive people in the country who have interrogated themselves about these things, but like a lot of people, who aren't, like MAGA or something, are either like boomer conservatives, centrists, or they're like liberals, and it's like they're like
Mhm.
they're still like balking at the word communism or like whatever, like, and they're not thinking about Remick being somehow disenfranchised, even though he's in a position of power through his supernatural ability. Things like that is just like, uh, and it's funny because like I felt like in this moment she was almost like he was like, you gotta like be quiet about that. It's like, whereas like I don't want to get in trouble with Warner Brothers, because
Yeah, we don't say the C
I
word
got
around
them
here.
bankroll my Marxist movie, like I just thought it was great because it like took me a minute. I was like, why is he so like flustered, like, and I was like, oh, because he made like a commie socialist movie and he didn't want anybody to like put him on blast about it in his press junket,
I love
because
this.
he knew he couldn't talk about it in those terms, which is hence he was like, I said, you're really astute. I said it in the film.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and as much as this film is an examination of like racial interaction and tensions and all of the history in the US, it's also definitely an examination of class and um, the intersection really of race and class in America in particular. Just thinking about like the Chinese immigrants who work um, at the two different grocery stores, like general markets that they have, and like the whole purpose of that being that to keep businesses out of black people's hands, but they're not good enough for white people to do. So we'll create this class system where we can, plug in the immigrant Chinese who are here and they can serve both the blacks and the whites, but they're, you know,
Mm-hmm.
they have the benefits of not being black in the South, but then also they are not white either.
Mm-hmm.
But they have this class benefit from being able to own property, um, or at the very least, like own their businesses if they're not owning the property that's attached to it. and making revenue off of that, which is an opportunity that most of the Black community in this movie and in history have not had, the opportunity to have. So to like think of this movie as kind of a statement on communism and Marxism is interesting. I hadn't made the communist Marxist like attachment yet, but that makes a lot of sense. And I just love this idea of him being like, I can't answer this question.
Yeah, I was so disarmed by it, like his reaction where she's just like kind of laying it all out, and he just didn't expect to even have that conversation with anybody that day, like and he
I
was like, that's
guarantee
supposed
you
to
that
be a secret, like
that is the only person who has asked him that
yeah,
question
he
for
was totally
sure.
like floored by it, like he just wasn't ready. And I just thought it was so cute, him like turning to his wife and being like, "Help me!" And she didn't do anything. She was like, "You're on your own," kind of thing. Or she's like, "I'm not gonna say anything. Like you made what you made." I don't know.
Mhm.
That was kind of like the mood of it. Um, yeah. Oh, what you were saying about the Chinese family and the two shops and this great scene. I was really struck by the scene that you were talking about. He gets his daughter to go get his wife from the other shop, and she kind of walks onto the other side of the street. The implication being that the black shop is on one side and that the white shop is on the other side, but they own both of them, and so they have to straddle this fine line between the worlds. I was so interested in them as characters because honestly, I had never really thought about the Asian people in the South at that time. Right, that's just something that I never because we've never seen that on film before.
Never. Yeah, I hadn't
There
thought about
were a
it.
few things in this film that I felt were firsts, right? And that was definitely one of them. Like this whole idea of like there even being like Chinese run grocery stores in the deep south in the 30s. That just
Mhm.
hasn't occurred to most of us, and no doubt they were there, right? But like unless you were there at that time, it's just not something that you see reflected in the history books, right? So
Yeah.
him even just like shedding light on that, I think was a conversation starter, right? And that's pretty profound, for anyone who is Asian American and they go to see this film, and they have ancestry of their relatives coming here and starting their businesses, and then the like you were saying the difficulty, the kind of like fraught, uncomfortable in between that they would have to try to navigate somehow of being like the quote unquote model minority, right? But like
Mhm.
never being able to step out of line of that. One essay I was watching was really getting into that and getting into, for instance, the ways that the American culture really doubled down on trying to emasculate Asian men. Like
Mm.
they were getting into kind of like how there would be like really like racist cartoons and things like that, just like making Asian men seem like feminine or like buffoons somehow or like to be mocked, right? And it was like because they were like aware of like this kind of like draw of Asian men to white women, right? Of white women potentially being attracted to Asian men and wanting to start families with them, and they were trying to dissuade white women from that by planting these kind of like racist caricatures in the subconscious, right? So it was like, but the way that Kugler decides to portray like that Asian character, that Asian male character in this film, right, is like he's like like very attractive, very masculine, like in a position of power, right? Like so these are just things that like we just don't get the benefit of having seen them before in especially in like a big film, with a budget like this and Kugler's ability as a filmmaker, and it's just exciting that it even exists now. Like
Mhm.
I don't think it's a perfect film, but it's like it's a really, really good film, I thought, and I also thought that it's an important film, right? So perhaps at the end of
Yeah,
the day, that's more important than like a film being perfect, right? Is more so
exactly.
the fact that it's like extremely. I thought that I was like, this film's like really, really fun. Like this is a really enjoyable film, you know. For I think most people will enjoy this, and I thought that that was important because like the things that it's starting to get into and begin to interrogate are very important. So if you can make something that's fun and also like has real thoughts on its mind, you know, even if the average white viewer only gets like a quarter of that, then that's, I think, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. You know, like that's awesome that he could worm his way into, you know,
Yeah. I
that
think
he
one of
could
the
make his
things,
Marxist film without ever having to say that out loud.
yeah, I think one of the things that like really struck me so hard about this film is like how deeply American it is and how deeply this is like an American story. And I mean that in the sense of like it is exploring the diversity of this country that is so unique to anywhere else on planet Earth, really. In the fact that you have, you know, they talk about Native Americans at the beginning of the film. There's Asian Americans in Mississippi, which I guarantee you the majority of Americans were like, I didn't know that that was a thing. Um, and then, you know, the black and white communities in the South at the time. And just getting a movie that gives you those different perspectives in one movie is really refreshing. And like as someone who like really celebrates the diversity of America, I was really heartened to see a movie where it's not just you're not just getting one perspective per se, and that, you know, the typical perspective is the white male perspective. Um, but the interplay of all these different cultures coming together. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the dance scene alone is like, I like
Mm-hmm.
almost started crying, to be completely honest with
Mm-hmm.
you. The like
Yeah.
nerdy anthropologist in me was like, this is culture, and like we can all just live together. Like, and like, isn't America great? Like this couldn't happen anywhere
Mm-hmm.
else in
Mm-hmm.
1930. Like where you have this like group of people coming together, and it just like ugh, was
Yeah.
beautiful to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, really strikingly beautiful and unique film. You know, there's a lot of really great scenes in this, but I think, you know, that's the one that probably this film will be known for through the ages is like that scene with where Sammy starts playing "I Lied to You," and
Hmm.
um, and that's, you know, there's some magic in it for sure. There's other stuff I want to talk about, but well, you know, I kind of want to. Now that you brought that scene up, I kind of wanted to seed into the conversation for a minute that I feel is really not, kind of relevant to the whole inception of my podcast, which is kind of relating film to work as a practitioner specifically, but just definitely to, you know, femininity and those concepts in a general sense. And there were, you know, some things in this film that I think are very much so geared towards the perception of the world as a practitioner versus a more secular or Christian view of the world. And I
Mm,
think even the title itself is interrogating this. And I was very, very happy about that as a practitioner. You know,
yeah.
there's this whole concept that Kugler brings up in several interviews and kind of like within the context of the film itself to some degree, but there is like this kind of like mythology in the Deep South of certain blues players having gone to the crossroads and like quote unquote sold their soul to the devil to play really well, right?
Mm,
Even if you're not an African American, you've probably heard some kind of iteration of this like folktale.
Mhm.
There was a question for him that was from an interview on rogerebert.com. And the question was, you've shared stories about how some musicians said that they sold their soul to the devil to play guitar music the way they did. And his answer was, exactly, there's also this metaphor for artistic sacrifice, for how an oppressive system can dehumanize people and how people experiencing that dehumanization can rage against it through art. That rage develops so they can affirm their humanity. And
Mm.
to go back for a minute, that interview that I was talking about before with that critic, Hannah Flint, they were kind of discussing the title of the film, you know, and this kind of concept of like what makes a sinner, right? And he was talking about this, and he said that the people ultimately are the ones who decide. But there's this whole dichotomy, definitely in most cultures, but absolutely in American culture, right? Of what is sacred, what is profane, right? And he said, in the blues, there's no mind-body metaphysical separation, but in church concepts, there often is that the flesh is the enemy. And he said, in blues, the flesh is a part of you. And he kind of goes into like the kind of like very physical lived experience of Black Americans, especially at this time, right? Where a lot of people were sharecroppers and had to work cotton fields, and they were just doing hard physical labor all the time, right? And blues kind of was birthed from that kind of existential despair or existential kind of difficulty, right? That they were physically experiencing. And he in that other quote, he says that there's kind of like this, like that you are asserting your humanity through your art, right? And blues was inherently like a way to reassert one's like metaphysical inner world, right? Fighting against this like constant like dehumanization of like hard physical labor, right? So it's like
Hmm.
it's it's kind of heady, you know. Like I said, I
Yeah.
don't think most people watching this are going to get these things out of it the first time around. But Flint, she kind of like bounces off of him saying this and says that it is paganism that saves them, not these constructs. And I was like, girl, like I was like,
Yes.
ooh, say it, you know, like, or I was just like this gets into like the whole like crux of like one's own worldview, right? That like,
Mhm.
and so I've the more I've listened to his interviews, you know, the more I've come to really like this title for the film, because like it's really interrogating like so much about American culture, about Black American experience, you know, about who says what is sinful, and who said that they get to say that, you know, and there's just so much there. And I feel like you could think about that for a long time, you know, and watch this film several times and still kind of be mulling all of those things over. It's a lot of high concept stuff underneath the surface.
Yeah. And shout out to Annie in the movie with her hoodoo, because she's like, in my
Yeah.
opinion,
Thank you
the
for,
whole reason that
thank you.
they
Yeah.
had any chance of surviving.
hmm Yeah. Annie is my favorite character in this film. So I'm so glad that you brought her up. But share a little bit more about how you felt about Annie and how it relates to your
Yeah.
experiences.
I mean, I again like was really glad to see that they had representation of hoodoo culture, which is again very American, very unique, very distinct, and that it was presented in a way not to like make it seem for in a way that it is, in my opinion, and like
hmm
practitioners of magic, most of the ones that I know, how they
hmm
practice is like healing and through love and through care for
Yeah.
their community and others, and that is like 100% the feeling that I got from Annie, is that she's like protecting the community and like running her little like stall where she, sells her
Mm-hmm.
different mm, potions and whatnot. I mean, most of them are medicinal, but
Mm-hmm.
still, like, it's the magic of that is like was really beautiful to me, and the fact that, and then when when shit hits the fan, she like steps up and is like, "All right, well, this is what's happening, and
Mm-hmm.
we all need to like eat some garlic now to figure out which one of us make sure we're not all vampires."
I just love that bit where she like tosses the pickled garlic. Like, oh my god, that's so much fun, like just like I loved that Coogler was unafraid to like insert humor into the context of everything. It shows I think a lot of confidence in his own ability to make something fun and compelling.
Yeah.
Oh, within the wider context of everything we're discussing, and let me know if you don't want me to share this and I can edit it out. But I
Hmm.
just wanted to mention that you are married to a black man and that you have biracial children together. And
Hmm.
so I felt like, there were definitely probably things that you were kind of noticing about the film, perhaps just, having close proximity, I think, to a black
Yeah.
man in your daily life, right? And also having to reckon with, the experience that your children will have as they're growing up, and that being in so many ways interrogated in so many aspects in Sinners.
Yeah.
Like there's like with the Mary character and kind of like racial ambiguity and things like that, and historically how that would how that would affect someone's lived experience in the Deep South, for instance, at the time.
Yeah, well, and I think we just had the anniversary of the Loving Supreme Court case that made interracial marriage like legal across the country. And every year when that like pops up as like a memory for me, because I follow like the ACLU and a bunch of other legal stuff because I'm also a lawyer.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's I always get like important updates or like reminders of like these were important cases. So every year, like I always get notifications about Loving Day, and it really I try to like be conscious about the fact that like not that long ago, my relationship would be illegal. And like getting to watch a film like this where you have a character like Mary and oh my gosh, I can't remember. She's with Stack, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mary and Stack. And like their whole relationship dynamic and like yeah, that was the 30s, which is like kind of long ago, but not that long ago.
Hmm.
Um
Especially not in the Deep South.
yeah.
Not as much has improved there as one would hope.
Yeah, and then just, white supremacy rearing its ugly head in modern times. Um
Hmm.
it's just very interesting. And I try to be cognizant of the challenges that, my husband faces as a black man in America and my kids are going to face as biracial in this world. Um, so I'm just really glad that there's films like this that are exploring these topics and hopefully getting people to like think just a little bit beyond the surface. They don't have to
Yeah.
do deep dive podcasts like we're doing right now, but just do a little below the surface scratch is all you need to do.
Yeah, I do think there's something for everyone in a film like this, right? Like because like you were just saying, like you'll still get something out of this even if you're not interested in diving deeper, right? Like he made a film that I think is accessible to the average audience in a lot of ways, but also is interrogating very difficult themes, and he was like unafraid to kind of make it I wouldn't say palatable, but compelling, right? And just like a lot of fun to watch. And I really like that he did that. Like he was like, I just want to make a really fun film that I would enjoy, and
Mhm.
then also put these headier ideas about class, about race in there. Talking a little bit more about Annie, like you were saying, I wanted to point out that for one thing, like hoodoo is a closed practice for people with Black ancestry specifically. So I, for instance, don't practice that form. I'm not a practitioner
Mm-hmm.
of that, and I have only a minimal understanding of hoodoo, right? Because like I am aware of that being a closed practice, so I'm not gonna overstep my bounds. But just in a general sense, right? As a magic practitioner, and I think anybody who is a practitioner of any magic path would probably agree that that the representation that Kugler has of Annie in this film is very respectful, and shows us, it just kind of opens the door just a little bit on a specific magical path, right? And it's just something that I felt like not only do we not get to see that respectful representation of hoodoo that's also accurate in mainstream media, but also just in general, right, of being a magic practitioner and what that actually looks like in practice versus like this kind of like woo woo idea that people have of those things and how they work, like
Yeah.
it's like the idea of like the fortune teller with a magic crystal ball versus like what that actually looks like in practice, right? And I was just so struck by it, like, and I knew I had to bring it up if we were going to talk about this film on my podcast, because like that's my podcast is about is about witchcraft, is about magic practitioners, is about like that specific lifestyle and how it pertains to film, and how one can relate that to their practice, specifically. So I was just so I was so thrilled, and I felt like a almost a palpable sense of relief about it
Yeah.
in a funny way, where I felt like I'm like getting a little bit emotional even voicing this, but I felt like it opened a door that would allow filmmakers moving forward to also approach the craft and the lived experience of a magic practitioner in a way that is far more respectful and true to lived experience than previous
Mm-hmm.
representations of this in film. And I'm sure, I would be super interested to hear what an actual hoodoo practitioner would say as far as how they felt about the representation of Annie in the film. I've heard very positive things, online, but I haven't been able to speak with someone face to face about it. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I think from what I've heard that it is a very respectful portrayal. And from what I know, in my own magical practice, it certainly felt very authentic and very respectful to me. I know that, like I said, I have a limited understanding of hoodoo because that's how it has to be. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a wonderful character, and it's a wonderful juxtaposition with Mary. I thought, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that specifically
Hmm.
as the two love interests in the film. I think it's an important kind of like subtextual dialogue that's going on right there about like we don't get to see a lot of women like Annie as the romantic counterpoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's an important juxtaposition that's happening there. I think it's important for like me to be careful about talking about that, because like it's not really my place to really get into it, like passing versus a a black woman with
Yeah.
a realistic body, for instance, things like that. Like, but I do think that Kugler is very cognizant of those things,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just happy that it was there, to even be a jumping off point for people who haven't even ever had those conversations before.
Yeah.
I think it's just an ongoing dialogue in the film that I think is important and interesting and compelling, and needs to be on film and needs to be, present in these stories to make them authentic,
Yeah, absolutely.
and Annie being the benevolent presence, and like I said, she's my favorite character in this film. So I just felt like so strongly about her and so protective about her, and
Yeah.
yeah, I just was really, really happy personally
Yeah, I
with
think they did a really good
all of it.
job with telling Annie's like story and her magic practitioner in like a respectful way, like you said. Um, and also I really enjoyed maybe this is the extreme atheist in me, but I really enjoyed the like play on words with the name and also just like this play on this concept like you were saying of like Christianity and like who's deciding who's sinners and ultimately like as you said before and in my opinion like it was paganism that saved them, like it was Annie and her
Legit,
paganism.
legit. So I had to get behind that. Like,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was 100%. I mean, that among a lot of other reasons was why I texted you the second I got out of the theater. I was like, we got to talk about this witch in this movie who saved everyone
absolutely.
from vampires.
Yeah, I was like, at that once I was over, I was like, I need to talk to witches about this film, like, and just be like, look, like this is a great portrayal of a practitioner, like I can't really speak for ever having seen this on film before in a way that felt so respectful,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to the Black community.
Hmm.
Especially because it's been like exoticized so much, and so many portrayals of hoodoo and voodoo in film are so inaccurate and so demonized, and yeah, it's just like I said, it felt like such a breath of fresh air, like it was opening the door on something totally new that hopefully we will see more of in films to come.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that she got, I guess, kind of her own version of a happy ending at the end of it. Because she deserved it, her and Smoke.
Yeah, I was definitely crying.
That made me cry for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Like that got me real bad because I and
Yeah.
I'm not sad.
Yeah.
I'm not against kind of saying something about it, but I had a really difficult pregnancy with our child and almost had a miscarriage. So anything about like losing a child or like anything kind of in that
Yeah.
whole realm, and like it just is. I think it'll always affect me really deeply
Mhm.
because I had such a difficult pregnancy experience. So yeah, I was just so happy with all of that, and this kind of like redemption or whatever you want to call it
Mhm.
of them and their family, and their relationship with each other, and all of those things. Just beautifully done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So going back a little bit to the scene with Sammy and him kind of conjuring the future and the past, right? Is how I heard it referred to.
Yeah.
Thought referred to at one in one clip. Um, that is also okay. So Kugler, is obviously kind of playing on this mythology of someone having to sell their soul to the devil to play really well. But oh, okay. For one thing, I know that some Black creators have mentioned specifically that that's a mythology that is perhaps misinterpreted, right, by a white listener. That probably the deity called Pavalegba is the one that was originally referred to in that mythology. That deity was like known for being at the crossroads, and he's benevolent, and he's kind of like the guardian. He guards the entrance to the underworld, right? But
Mhm.
he's not a devil. He's not a malignant deity. And it was more so about a dialogue, right, between the person coming to the crossroads and talking to him and receiving ability from him, right? So that's interesting in and of itself, right? As just like a pagan concept, right? And like I said, I'm aware that, like, those are closed practices, so that's really all I know about that, and all I feel like I should be able to know.
Mhm.
But I think that that's really interesting, just conceptually, right? And I think that that was probably, at least to some extent, as far as Kugler has done his own research on those things, or if he knows any hoodoo practitioners in his own life, and those things being distorted historically, right? Like further interrogation of this idea of a sinner, right? That even the whole like mythology around like things like that, like folk tales, like of meeting up with the devil and making a Faustian pact with him, like that in and of itself is probably misinterpreted as far as
Mhm.
like what does the deity look like, and what is its intention, and what does it promise you, and what does it want in return, like this gets into like this like whole thing about like the Christian worldview versus like more pagan concepts of a worldview, like
Yeah.
and and that is that, like it's a very pagan film. Like I'm very pleased with that. Like, and I'm sure you too, as a recovering, from having been raised Catholic, like,
Yeah.
or an atheist recovering from Catholicism as you are, like that just conceptually
Yeah.
is, he got away with so much,
No, like truly.
like truly like made out like a bandit, and that's why when she put him on blast like that, he's like, don't say that, like, he's like, I can't talk about it, because he's like, I
Truly.
made it, a Marxist pagan film. Like, it's in the film,
Yeah.
he's like, I'm not gonna say it because it's
We can't be that obvious out here, but
not yet, and not at this
yeah,
time, kind of thing.
exactly.
So
Yeah, well, and I think there's also something really beautiful about the like just, the magic of music and like
yeah,
what
thank you. I got
that can
derailed a
do.
little bit, but yes, that was the point I was gonna eventually make.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I mean, I connecting what you said about like the lore of, selling your soul for music.
Hmm.
I think there's also an element of the lore of just like the power of music in and of itself and its ability to like transcend time and space and pierce into the human soul in a way that I don't really know if anything else can. I mean, it's its own form of magic in its
Yeah,
own way.
and that Kugler himself was like making a point where he's like, this form of music that was demonized and said to be sinful is in fact transcendent and holy in its own
Mhm.
right. It just depends on your perspective, right?
Yep.
That like this in fact has power the likes of which the white man would never acknowledge, right?
Mhm.
That because this is, for some this is church, for
Yep.
some, church is church, but for some this is church, and that I think is lovely. And reclaims
Mhm.
the narrative.
Yeah, for sure.
So if I have I have one criticism, and it's a small thing, but it's just my personal thing that I have that I want to
Okay.
say,
All right, lay it on
and
me.
it's that okay. Remember the scene where Remick like runs up to this house and he's like banging on the door because he's gonna get burnt to a crisp, and the guy lets him in, and then these Choctaw vampire hunters ride up on their horses, and I'm like, damn, I was like, I love this, and that was their only scene,
Yeah.
and I was like, why? I was like, I want a
Yeah.
whole film about them. Like I was just personally sad, like I was
No,
like
I
I was like
100%
I was
agree
like,
with that.
how you gonna tease me like that? And then just be like, that's all you get, so I
No,
was
like truly, I do I don't know where things stand on like a sequel for Sinners or whatever, or just like an anthology, but like I want a movie with the Choctaw
Or no, I was like, it better be like
vampire
three
hunters.
quarters Choctaw Vampire Hunters. That's all I'm gonna say. Like I get it, he ran out of time, or something,
Yeah.
but like I said, like why you gonna tease us like that? Like it's just like cruel and unusual, Like it was at the end of the movie, and it's like the end credits, and I'm like, but what about the Choctaw Vampire Hunters? It's like, so yeah, valid
I'll get on
criticism
board with
in
it,
my
'cause
opinion. Like I
yeah.
just think we could have got like a couple more things up though,
Yeah.
but cool nevertheless that they were there.
I would have loved a like I told you so moment at the end. That would have been great.
Yeah, something like even like a post-credit scene or something, with the talk to like something. So yeah, that's my criticism. I think a lot of people would prop me up on that. Well, darling, I am so pleased that you were in this episode with me, and thank you very much for being here and spending this time with me.
It was a pleasure.
Is there anything else you feel like you must say about this
I
film?
need to have a little moment. I'm sorry. About Michael B. Jordan. And number one, how insanely hot he is. Like, let's just get that off like on the table. Like, okay, yes. And then like the costuming in this movie was amazing.
Yeah, Academy Award winner Ruth Carter.
And
Two-time Academy Award winner Ruth Carter in Pact.
the fact that he can play like two so very distinct twins. I didn't know that he played twins when I like walked into this movie. I thought I was only getting one Michael B. Jordan for the price of my ticket, and I got two.
You were overjoyed.
I was overjoyed. I like almost jumped out of my seat when
I was gonna say you're
first
probably like
seen.
vibrating out of your seat.
Oh my god, it was insane. But also just like besides the fact that he's like really hot, he is also just like genuinely like so talented, and I just wanted to like take a moment to acknowledge like he really freaking crushed it in this role in a way that I don't know if anyone else could have done it. And I'm just really glad. Everyone else in the movie was hot too. I just want to preface that as well.
Yeah, we should mention as an end note that most of the people who are listening to this have probably already watched this film, but like there's a surprising amount of like pro pussy dialogue in this film.
Yes,
like very much so for the pussy. Like
yes,
I think Coogler is pro pussy, like since he did in fact write this film.
He's out here educating the young men of this country
about the clit.
The importance of the clit.
Yeah, I
really
appreciated,
that.
I was like, thanks for, putting a little word in for the clit. I mean, I'm glad.
He's doing the work. Thank you,
among
Ryan
other
Coogler.
things. Also putting work in for the clit, Thank you.
Oh my god. But I think that was
good
probably
Sir Coogler. Always salute you.
It's a spectacular film, and I highly recommend. And as someone who like is not a big horror person, I was like so pleasantly surprised when I went to this horror movie.
Yeah, it's got something for everybody. I definitely think so.
Yeah.
Like this is like this is a film that like feels like an instant classic, like this will always, for me, this is like already like it's like forever summer horror, like there's like Halloween horror films, and then there's like another group of films that I call summer horror, right, which are like set in like a summery hot environment or something. This to me is like instant canon of summer horror films that are must watches, for your, if like I was going to recommend films for somebody who's getting into horror for the first time and they were all like in that theme, this would definitely 100% be on that list every single time. And I think it's definitely doing interesting. You would think that there was nothing left to do in the vampire genre, but I think that this is actually doing something that feels fresh with vampires. There's also like a lot of traditional vampire stuff in this, which I also really like. And actually, the whole little like montage about like like different vampire things, but Thanks to Annie, of course, because that's why you need. This is my argument that you need everybody needs a witch in their crew, like, because how else are you going to know how to fight a vampire if a vampire turns up? Like, you need a witch, like, you need a magic practitioner of some kind, like in your crew, because like, what are you going to do? How are you going to know what to do? But yeah, and the music's really great in the film, like all around really good. Beautiful original songs, and then the people who sing songs in this film are great singers, and it's very fun.
Yeah, it's definitely an ode to blues, and like, to full circle from one of the first things you said was like, this is a story about his uncle who plays the blues.
But also like
really
showcases like really beautiful Irish folk songs as well, and
yes, oh yes,
just neat. I just think it's neat.
Me too, and it doesn't hurt that everybody is really fun to look at.
It's a very horny film, an extremely horny film. Carolyn's favorite kind of film.
Yeah.
Put you on blast.
You're
like, I didn't know that the film would be so horny, and therefore so much so for me.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine running into not one, but two Michael B. Jordans out in the wild? I would die. I would have a heart attack and die.
I would die.
And then, Mary and Annie are freaking hot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody's
Remick is even hot.
a hottie. Yeah, he's a hottie, yeah. Definitely. I mean...
and all of them, they're so great. It was so beautiful. It was a masterpiece. It was just like everything.
Yeah,
about
some of this. Some of the cinematography in this, I was like, that looks good. Like, I was just like, oh, okay, that looks really nice. You just like kind of slackjawed, because I believe it was shot for IMAX. So it's just very even on a home screen, it's very impressive. Looks really, really beautiful. There's like that one shot of the twins with like, it's like sunset. It just really looks spectacular. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's just like one shot, like of them standing in a field and looking out on the sunset, and it's just like it's a real gobsmacker. That's one of many.
Chef's kiss all around.
Well, thank you, my darling, once again for being here with me and talking about how this wonderful horny film is now with us all forever.
Yes.
At the beginning of Marxist vampire films, hooray!
Woo!
And yeah, you're the best.
So as ever, here at the end of the episode, I'm going to share a spell that pertains in some way to the film that we just discussed. This spell is calling on the aid of your ancestors. I think that in the context of Sinners, there's some emphasis put on, obviously, hoodoo, having prominently featured a practitioner of hoodoo, right? But I would say in many magical traditions, especially when it comes to like quote unquote white magic, right? Magic that is beneficent or benefic, an open channel of communication with one's ancestors is usually prominent in some way, especially, at different times of year and things like that. The witch's new year called Samhain. Some people say Samhain because that's what it looks like it says, but yeah, it's pronounced Samhain or Samhain. Is considered the new year for a lot of practitioners of witchcraft and different pagan paths. And that is supposed to be a time of year where it's particularly potent to talk to your ancestors, as the veil between the worlds is said to be very, very thin, the thinnest for throughout the entire year. So I would say that the presence of ancestors, right, is implied in a lot of Sinners. There is a kind of subtext of ancestry, right, and of history. And I think that there's definitely an implication rather than an outright affirmation, right, in Sinners that that the ancestry of enslaved Black people is definitely, part of the context of the story, but also just like the ancestry of the people who are directly involved in the film is definitely kind of at the forefront of all the discussions. So yeah, I thought that this would be a good positive spell. I've done several spells already for protecting one against malignant forces and things like that. So I just didn't want to do another spell like that for this episode, even though it would definitely pertain. So you could go back into my episode that I just did on Hellraiser, for instance, if you wanted to spell like that, as far as like protecting oneself from like vampiric energy and things like that, that spell would work really well. And so would some of the ones that I've done in the past. So I just wanted to do something a little different for this one. And I thought that that kind of long history of Black practitioners and that long history of magic practitioners in general, and a way that you can use magic to kind of tap into your relationship with your ancestry and make connections if that's something that you so desire. So, sit at an appropriate altar or make one. So, I would say that if you already have altars in your home, if you're already a practitioner, or if you're beginning your path as of being a practitioner, you may already have some altars in your home. I have lots of altars, and they generally are for different deities and have potentially very different energies. So if you're picking an altar that you already have, you definitely want to choose one that has an energy that is uh, compatible in some way with the ancestors, with the energy of ancestry, particularly of history. Uh, with liminal states, right? So, like I was saying, how Samhain has to do with kind of like the veil being extremely thin between the worlds. That's a liminal state, is like the in between the world of the dead and the world of the living. Some deities specifically deal with that, specifically deal with the underworld, with a crossroads, with gateways or opening doors. I have several deities that I have a relationship with who deal specifically with opening doors and with gateways. One is Santa Muerte, who opens doorways and makes opportunities. And the god Ganesha as well is also an opener of doorways. So if you have a deity that you speak to who is an opener of doorways in some way, or helps, usher one forward on the path, or deals with the underworld, or any of those kinds of things, that's a great altar to do this spell at. If you don't have any altars in your home, you can make one easily and quickly. Some of the things that I would recommend that you could potentially gather at an altar that you already have, or if you're trying to just make one to do this spell, you can gather up some items that remind you of ancestors who are important to you. If you have anything like hand-me-downs from a specific person, or if you have anything that was left to you in a will, or old photographs of this person, those are all things that would be excellent for an altar if you're doing a spell regarding your ancestors. There are some flowers that you could use. You can buy most of these at like a regular like Walmart or another store, like a Trader Joe's or something. Carnations, white lilies, rosemary, orchids, white and black roses. These are all flowers that are associated with the dead. So generally, when we're talking about ancestors, we're not talking about people who are still alive. We're talking about people in your lineage who have already passed on. So any of these flowers would work really well. And you're going to need some kind of incense. Some of the incenses that you could use that are really good for ancestors, for speaking to the dead, I would say specifically in this case, right? Dead that is your ancestry is what we're talking about, right? Not random dead. Like, if you feel like you need to like do the spell that I shared in my last episode, about like making sure you're protecting yourself and all of that, like don't just be calling upon the dead. You know what I mean? Cover your ass. But some of the incenses you could use: rose, sandalwood, patchouli, copal, of course, sage, of course, Palo Santo. Yeah. So I would say light your incense, ground yourself, and you could recite. This is just an example. Dear ancestors, please guide my path. Help me discern what will heal and harm me. Move me to the way best suited for for my greatest happiness. So mote it be. You can edit these words as needed, especially if you have a specific question or a specific obstacle. Years ago, before I met my husband, I was going through a really difficult time. I was deep, deep in confusion about the path forward for me. And that year on Samhain, I called upon my grandma to give me guidance, my paternal grandmother, who I had a very close relationship with when I was young, and she had a really magical, big, beautiful Victorian house that I still dream about all the time, and just had a profound impression on me at a very young age. It was just such a magical place, this house. And she and my grandfather passed when I was 14, 6 months apart. And it was like it was a very, very abrupt end to my childhood. My childhood was over after that. I felt it very acutely, and it ushered in a very difficult period for me as a young person. But yeah, I was going through a difficult time, and I called on her for aid. Um, at the time, I was left with a very distinct impression that she had moved on, that she was not in the liminal place, that she was in the beyond, and happily had moved on to that place without difficulty. And so her presence, though not gone, was also not close. But after I did this spell, I found two things of hers that I had been looking for a long time, that one in particular, I thought I had lost. One was her wedding picture. She and my grandfather, a picture that I remember seeing a lot growing up in her house, that someone at some point had printed a copy of. I think my mom had done it and sent it to me in the mail. But it was a picture that I had been looking for a long time and hadn't been able to find. And this happened within like a day or two, I think, that I found one and then I found the other, and both I had been looking for like a couple years. So I found this wedding picture of hers, and then I also found a amethyst pendant for like a necklace pendant. She had lots and lots of jewelry when I was a kid. I remember looking at her vanity and admiring all her jewelry, but I only got a couple pieces of it. I have a bunch of siblings and some cousins and things like that, so I personally did not get much of her stuff when she passed. But I did get like two pieces of her jewelry, right? One of them was this amethyst pendant. And I had honestly thought that it was gone forever. And finding these two things of my grandmother's around the same time when I was going through like such immense kind of psychological, emotional difficulty, assured me that not only was she there and she had heard me, but also that everything was going to be okay. That was just the feeling that I was left with. And pretty soon after that, things started to radically improve for me. A spell like this can definitely have a real impact, can bring you closer to your ancestry and your lineage, your history, all of those things. So, yeah. And on that note, as above, so below, and peace out. Until next time.